So we're really delighted that Claire has joined us tonight. Claire is the Chief Exec Officer for Plastic Free North Devon, and she's worked on many conservation projects around the world, including working for Surfers Against Sewage as a rep for the last 5 years. She's come face to face with some of the world's most majestic creatures and also witnessed the issues they face. She has been instrumental in gaining positive local support for Plastic Free North Devon campaigns and has helped to galvanise community action to help our wildlife. So Claire, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you for that rather optimistic introduction. Welcome everyone, and thanks for turning up to my talk. I know that Nicola called this talk Go Plastic Free, but I've kind of taken this talk we will talk about some plastic free stuff, obviously, and ways of being able to do that. But what I wanted to talk about is how the plastic crisis is kind of helping us build a stronger environmentally connected communities, and how recognising and acting on the crisis actually for so many of us has enabled us and put us on the journey to recognising our footprint on the world and how we can all play our part in improving it. So I won't say too much about myself, but yeah, Nicola introduced me pretty well. My name's Claire Moodie, obviously. I'm a local to the area, grew up here, and yeah, I am the CEO of Plastic Free North Devon, but I'm also an activist, scientist, a surfer, someone that absolutely loves spending time in the outdoors and not sitting at a computer, which doesn't bode well with my job at the moment. But I'm also a mother, and I think that's probably the most key thing that I found on this journey for me is the way that I've kind of taken it kind of bull by the horn style, because I've got a generation that's coming after me that I kind of want to make sure has a planet fit for purpose. And I think having some of the experiences that I've had and working in the conservation sector and having those kind of magical like life-changing experience, I suppose, is kind of the thing that kind of drives me to look after the planet and improve it and protect it going forward. So Plastic Free North Devon itself is obviously the thing that I'm in charge of at the moment, and we're on a mission to protect and improve our environment through community-led action to combat plastic pollution. I'm not going to go too much into about my background because Nicola's already just said, but just in terms of the conservation projects that I have worked on, I've kind of worked from coral restoration projects to obviously a rep for Surfers Against Sewage. I studied marine geography at university. I've worked on a leatherback sea turtle project, digging for relocating and collecting eggs at midnight and walking through coastal rainforests. And obviously most recently, since I've been back here the last probably 5 years, took up volunteer work with SAS. And it was when I kind of took up the work with SAS that I realised that conservation work wasn't something that was happened far away. It was actually something that was going on right on my doorstep. And I think up until that point, until I kind of come back and settled properly in North Devon, it wasn't something that I'd really connected with. Was that actually I kind of grew up thinking that my world was quite perfect, and we had the beaches right on our doorstep, and these things that we needed saving were these kind of big majestic creatures, and they were the things that were in trouble. And it wasn't until kind of later on in my life, I suppose, that I realized that everything was so much more interconnected, and rather than seeing problems in silos, I started to see things in a much more kind of a holistic way. And I wanted to be back in North Devon, so I wanted to start working on issues facing here. And I also worked with and volunteered with the North Devon Coast AOMB and with the Biosphere as well over the last couple of years. And Plastic Free North Devon itself was actually set up in 2017 off the back of the Surfers Against Sewage Plastic Free Communities campaign, which some of you might know a little bit about. But that basically gave us a toolkit to start not just cleaning beaches, but actually to start tackling the source of the problem. So talking to businesses, government, and working with individuals and community groups to really kind of start to harness and change in our community to actually stop the flow of plastic. And that's kind of where it began. And that toolkit was an amazing engine starter for us as a community group. But it didn't quite do everything that we needed. And what we recognised in North Devon was that I think it started such a fire in us that we realised it was a lot more that we could be doing. It opened our eyes to all sorts of lobbying and projects we could be doing in our own area. And Services Against Sewage unfortunately didn't particularly want to fund us to do that individual work, so we kind of pulled away and started getting funding for ourselves to kind of really focus on what was important to our area, hence why Plastic Free North Devon is actually a charity in its own right, and it's just over probably, well, we've been a community group for 3 years, but we've probably been a charity status for just under 2 actually. And right now we're kind of focused on tackling plastic pollution head on. We do this through raising awareness, reducing consumption, clearing it from our environment, and developing a circular economy. We try to inspire and reconnection with nature, which kind of sits right at the heart of what we're trying to do here. We try and facilitate sustainable behaviour, providing toolkits and tips and tricks on how to do it. And we're trying to support a sustainable local economy as well. And this kind of image just depicts a bit of a snapshot of some of the projects that we've done over the last couple of years. Obviously, the last year has been a really tough one for us and for many other charities and individuals and communities in general. But we still managed to kind of harness some really nice campaigns, both online and kind of in person as well. But our kind of, I suppose, the most exciting couple of things that we've got going on at the moment are our Protect Our Playground Wooden Bodyboard project, which was kind of came about because of the amount of plastic kind of cheap polystyrene bodyboards that we were finding on our beaches. And it was, we think we found 300 at Croyd one year. And this was kind of a result, I suppose, of us trying to combat that problem, and created a bit of a pilot hire program down at Saunton. And we've now scaled that up this year. We've hopefully got 3 or 4 places hiring the wooden bodyboards out. And for us, it was actually a bit of a revenue generator. Obviously, we need, as a charity, we're trying to sustain ourselves, and we can't rely on funding from Pickwell forever. So we needed to start thinking about how we would sustain the charity. So the bodyboard hire was an income driver as well as an awareness thing. But also it's a messaging that these bodyboards have on them. And I think anyone that's renting those bodyboards can't avoid that kind of deep down messaging that's kind of calling on everyone to play their part in protecting our playground. And the other things, we've obviously VR education we've been working on the last couple of years, and that's I'll talk about that one a bit more in a bit more detail in a minute, because that's quite an exciting project going forward. And we created a water bar that we could use at events to stop people using single-use plastic water bottles. Obviously, we clean up the environment. And you might have seen on our social medias, if you follow us, we've just launched our 3rd year of our visitor campaign, which is, we tried to tie in with the bodyboard stuff as well, but it's all about trying to get visitors kind of clued in to the area before they get here. So recognizing that they're entering a biosphere reserve, an AONB, and then giving them lots of tips and tricks to think about when they're here. So, because what we find with any environmental movement or activism, kind of people have to start somewhere, and it needs to be repeated several times, or the penny needs to drop several times before they actually start taking action. And I suppose the visitor campaign for us is merely an awareness raising campaign. It doesn't have any kind of, I suppose, actual physical aspects to it, but it's an information awareness campaign, which we think reached over about 100,000 guests last year, visitors to North Devon. So we're hoping to kind of double that impact for next year. And this is just a really brief snapshot of our achievements over the last year. Again, quite difficult because of COVID, but we still managed to reach 100,000 people with our visitor campaign. We attended over 53 events and assisted 2 to become fully plastic free. That was the AONB Marathon and the Croyd Ocean Triathlon. We've saved 3,800 litres of water served at our water bar, which has saved over 7,200 single-use plastic water bottles being put into our environment. We talked to 2,500 people through our Plastic Ambassadors program the last couple of years, and we've had over 750 volunteer hours dedicated to our projects and events. And just to give you a bit of a snapshot of our objectives going forward, we are doing all sorts of kinds of stuff, but our first one is our ongoing education, and I think that underpins everything that we're trying to do. Obviously, we're trying to connect people with the environment, but there's also, you're connecting them with it, but then you need to give them the tools to do something about protecting it. So that's kind of part and parcel of our VR, but I'll go into a bit more detail on that in a minute. We're obviously using community events to educate and inspire the community to take action, which will hopefully be back up and running from July in a kind of more normal fashion, and we'll be able to get out and about a lot more. Our visitor campaign is obviously going to continue to inspire people to protect our playground. We are trying our hand at lobbying for the first time properly. So we've actually spent the last couple of months lobbying for a cheap polystyrene bodyboard ban. And we've actually launched a UK Gov petition, which you can all sign and find on our website. We've got just over 5,500 signatures so far. So we've got till August to try and get that up to at least 10,000, which I'm pretty confident we'll be able to do so. We collaborate obviously within the community, and we try and stimulate action with local organisations and cross-party government through our Plastic Free North Devon consortium, which again has kind of been on the slow over the last probably 12 months, but we're hoping to kick that back up and running in the next couple of months as well with the council, which all seems quite positive. And we are at the moment developing and piloting a kind of a sustainable business collective program with North Devon small businesses, which kind of aims again to kind of provide tools and expertise and support that isn't consultancy fee based in any stretch. So it's just about trying to get people to share information, to try and get people on a journey of trying to put kind of the environment front and center of their businesses. And one of the things that we've found is that bigger businesses, kind of, you know, larger than SMEs, tend to have the funds to be able to afford consultancy to look at their carbon footprint and plastic reduction. But it kind of seems to be, for us, it's the small SMEs that are kind of left behind. So it's trying to think about how, as an organisation, we can start facilitating that sort of work and helping it. And I think one of the things that we find is that if you can get a business to actually put the environmental stuff front and centre of their business, and that's actually then going out to employees and then the families of those employees, that's actually kind of a faster route than to us just banging on about it on social media or at singular events. So it's kind of about about creating a kind of more comprehensive education program aimed at all sorts of parts of society. And this is, I'm just going to go into one detail about one project, and I'm going to go on to some other things. But our VR Ocean Explorers program, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the development of this, because this is probably one of our most exciting things that we're doing this year. And it's developed, I suppose, kind of on top of the VR education that we've been doing the last couple of years. But we managed to get funding from the AONB and the Garfield and Western Fund to be able to develop 360 footage of actually our environments here in North Devon. So previous to this, we've just been using what we call Google Explore footage, which was kind of downloaded footage that was kind of, you know, we could take people on research dives with sharks, and we could take people onto coral reefs, but we couldn't talk to them about what was on in North Devon. And so this film's about these films. So we're creating three. One is about Lundy, diving with seals. One is about exploring the rocky shore. And one of them is going to be focused on Water Coast and looking at some of the kind of regeneration programs that are being done by the Devon Wildlife Trust along some of our rivers. And the whole idea about this is trying to really connect people with what's on our doorstep. So I spoke right at the beginning about how often with environmental stuff and conservation, you often think about it as something that's far away, something that's being done by other people, something that's, yeah, far away. But actually we have some magnificent stuff on our coast. And I think that one of the ideas with obviously this is trying to immerse people in that. And the idea is to obviously to employ a couple of ambassadors that we're currently trying to get funding for, to be able to roll out this outreach program. But the most exciting bit is that we're trying to get funding to take 16 as a pilot this year, just to take 16 children from schools around North Devon, so 2 from each secondary school, to actually go to Lundy and have a kind of holistic experience there, whether they be on a boat. Well, some of them are going to be on a boat. So some of them are going to be on a boat, and some of them are going to actually get the opportunity to snorkel with easy divers. So they're going to be running a trip for us. So they're going to be doing some rocky shore snorkeling, and then they're going to be doing some diving with seals. And the idea is that that they'll obviously have these experiences, and it's these children that are going to be allowed to be able to go on these trips are going to be directly aimed at kind of the vulnerable and kind of lower income background families that maybe don't have the opportunity to do these sorts of things. So it's about trying to create that access for all, I suppose. So the idea is that obviously they'll come on the trip, they then have to commit to volunteering with us over the summer for a couple of hours every couple of weeks. So potentially between 6 and 8 hours over the course of the summer. And then they obviously have to talk about their experience to the school. So this is basically, we're just trying to connect people with what's on our doorstep and try and create a bit of a wave of, I suppose, information and inspiration in our young people, and actually just giving them access and empowering them to actually kind of stand up for what we've got on our doorstep and take some action for themselves. And this kind of quote obviously sits right at the heart of what we do, and I suppose this project in particular. But no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will ever care about what they have never experienced. And I think, we often, especially in the conservation sector, and especially when I'm doing talks, or you're at beach cleans, you're often talking to people that are already converted, they're already at the beach, they're already swimming, they're already surfing, they're already connected with the ocean in some way. And actually the only missing link for them is understanding the impact that it's threatened. And once they kind of get that, they're kind of up for action, and maybe they want to take steps to do something about it. But actually the missing bit often is actually people aren't even getting to experience some of these places that we talk about connecting. And if we want to really talk about, this is our UN kind of ocean decade, to save the oceans, and that we're in it, we're 2 years in, but we have to bring everyone along with us. And I think for us, and particularly at Plastic Free North Devon, it's really crucial to the work that we're doing. And so that's kind of the nice bit about what we're doing, and a bit of an update on our campaigns. But I'm just going to touch a bit on why we're doing this. So obviously, and I've used this slide probably in every presentation I've ever done, is obviously the plastic pollution that we find on our beaches is just the tip of the iceberg. The plastic crisis is a global problem, and plastic is one of the most persistent pollutants on Earth. It's made to last and does for more than 400 years. It's predicted to be more plastic than fish by 2050. Oh, sorry. And plastic production has increased 20-fold since the 1960s, and it's set to quadruple in the next 30 years. And this might be because of, obviously, with the oil and gas industry, less oil and gas being used for maybe cars, because we're converting to renewable energy and actually trying to capitalize on still being able to utilize those oil reserves to make some money. And the plastic industry is literally set to increase, which is a bit shocking. And this, I suppose, image just depicts kind of what that looks like on our beaches. This was actually only taken last week. We were down on the beach with a local organisation called Nurdle, who were focused on microplastic pollution and removing it from our environment. They've just created a couple of new machines, or they've been working with a company called Karcher, which is basically a reverse leaf blower to kind of try and suck up the microplastics. They went on the highest tides of the year. So what Josh has been doing is trying to work over this last week. So he's gone from Devon to Cornwall to kind of working with the highest tides of the year to try and pick up as much microplastics as possible. And the scale of the problem is, when you see it on the beach, and I'm sure some of you have, or maybe some of you haven't, but when you go on a high tide, and especially when we've had some big storms, the state of the beaches it can make you feel quite emotional, I suppose, one of the words, but also like what's the point in some ways. And I often, you look at these beaches and you look at the breadth of the problem sometimes, and it feels insurmountable in many ways. And but then you go and kind of get on the beach with those guys on Monday, and there's people hoovering it up, there's technology being designed to kind of combat this problem, and it's it doesn't suddenly seem so overwhelming. And I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed by this problem. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the important bit is to think about that there's lots of people doing good stuff. And so the other thing about, obviously, plastic is it originates from oil. And every time that plastic is produced, it produces CO2 at every kind of part of its life cycle. When you make a plastic bottle, it either goes in the bin, some of it's dumped at landfill, some of it's recycled, but some of that recycling might actually end up being shipped to a country that maybe doesn't actually, says that it will recycle it, but then doesn't actually recycle it. The issue of plastic is huge, and actually we can't recycle our way out of this problem. And actually they reckon that probably actually our recycling rates in North Devon are about between 40 and 45%. But actually only about 9% of actually what we put in our recycling actually gets recycled into something of equal value. A lot of what we put in our recycling often gets downcycled. And often a plastic bottle, so a kind of grade A PET bottle, could only actually be recycled between 8 and 10 times. So plastic in itself is not, although it is recyclable, obviously, but the amounts of the different types that we have and the scale of the stuff that we use is just too much for any recycling system to deal with. So whenever you think about buying anything that's wrapped in plastic, even if you can recycle it, it's great, obviously, but actually recycling isn't the answer. And this is just a couple of articles that I just pulled up. This actually, the one on the left, the plastic and health. Plastic isn't obviously just an environmental problem, it's also a health crisis as well. Plastic leaks toxins into our environment. It's been proven to do so in our own bodies and obviously in the bodies of other animals and mammals. And it is in a kind of interrupting our endocrine system and our hormones as well. And there's a really good report, just for any of you that want to do any further reading, by Seal, who did a huge report on the kind of the hidden costs of the plastic stuff, and it's related to health. It's a really good report. And then the other article I just wanted to draw your attention to is one that actually just came out a couple of weeks ago. There's a super scientist at the moment kind of doing heralded some research that's looking at the damage that plastic and pollutants, not just plastic, but the pollutants in our environment are causing to our reproductivity. And another one might be good to follow up on. And so when we think about plastic, it isn't, for me, and for I'm sure many of you that are listening, it isn't just the issue of it damaging in our environment. It isn't the issue of the fact that it's littering our beaches. It's a human rights issue. Plastic is a plastic when we talk about when we're dealing with the waste, and we talk about it being shipped. Obviously, it's often being shipped to poor parts of the world that aren't actually able to deal with that plastic. It's normally ditched into kind of places that are kind of, people that are poorer that can't deal with that stuff. It's a social issue. It's a health issue. It's a systemic issue. It's an environmental issue. It's a global issue, and it's a climate change issue. And plastic for us is kind of not for us, but for us as a community, it's a kind of gateway to opening up our eyes to the kind of level of, I suppose, overconsumption and the way that our planet's threatened by lots of different issues. So what can we do about it? So I'm not trying not too much on the downside, but what can we do about it? So the obvious thing always is obviously to try and reduce. And whenever we talk about trying to reduce our plastic use or any sort of energy or a sustainable kind of tip or trick, it's always about reducing what you're doing. And at the top of that always becomes education, which is kind of what we're trying to do with our VR kit and our outreach, and what obviously lots of NGOs are trying to do all the time is this kind of educational piece to connect people with the problem. People can't act unless they know about a problem. And then it's about providing tools. And often, I suppose, for us, especially when reducing plastic, you can only go so far. Supermarkets don't allow for you to live a completely plastic-free life unless you want to completely devoid yourself of any crisps or chocolate or any treats at all, which some people are prepared to do. I'm definitely not up for giving up the crisps. I have to have a packet at least once a month. But yeah, so it's looking at how we might reduce, then providing the tools, and then we're kind of working with reusing, and then recycle is always the last thing. And when we talk about single-use plastics, these are just the things that we always, I suppose, touch on. Is, cotton bud sticks, toothpicks that you can avoid, nappies, single-use cutlery, condiment sachets, single-use plastic water bottles. Cotton bud sticks are a really big one. We find heaps of those on our beaches. They often get flushed down the toilet. They often get through our sewage system because they're so small. And obviously the dreaded coffee cups. But this is kind of where we started a couple of years ago. And actually, as an organisation, I actually personally, maybe not as an organisation, it's actually quite hard to keep repeating these same things, because actually we know that lifestyle change isn't going to save us from this kind of plastic crisis or environmental crisis in any way, shape or form. But it is, we all have to do our bit, and absolutely we should be taking these little actions, and actually we should be leading by example. And lots of changes lots of people doing lots of little things do add up to a big change. And they are absolutely important. I've lost mine. And these are just some of the, I suppose, the alternatives to some of the simple things. So you can buy solid shampoos, bars from all sorts of different places. Now there's such a wealth of plastic-free alternatives out there. I was going to kind of put a list up, but it got too huge for the wealth of options out there. And it's in the last couple of years, it's grown massively. And there's lots of tips and tricks out there for how to reduce your plastic usage. And one of the big things, I think, as being a mum, I suppose one of the biggest things I had with Willow was when she was little was obviously nappies. So we opted to use reusable nappies, but also the baby wipes was kind of the big thing. And one of the best things that we use, I don't know if you've heard of them, is like cheeky wipes, which are basically just like little square flannels. And you have 2 boxes, a clean one and a dirty one, and you can use them instead of using your wipes. And they also work really well for just general cleaning mucky kids as well. I don't think I've used a wet wipe in about 3 years, unless someone's handing me one, feeling sorry for me, in a car park when Willow had spilt a load of paint all over B&Q car park. But I think that was the first time that I'd used a wet wipe in about 3 years. But these are just some of the really simple changes that you can do. Obviously, avoiding straws, wraps, beeswax wraps for sandwiches and salads and things. And also you can get these really nice cloth wraps as well, which you can just stick in the wash when you're done. The other thing to think about is the guppy bag, which helps catch microfibers from your washing. So every time that when we talk about plastic, we often think about things of the obvious things like single-use plastic water bottles, straws, things that we're kind of used to using everyday life, or I suppose single-use plastics, things that are on the go. But actually, plastic is in everything that we touch, in the glasses that we wear, in the computers, in our desks, in our clothing, in the paint that we put on our walls, in the carpets. And the scale of plastic in our environment is, like I said, insurmountable. But the thing about clothing is when you put it in your washing machine, obviously every time that you wash synthetic fibers, they reckon that if it's a synthetic wash, there's been up to 700,000 fibers released from every wash, which is massive. And microfibers are, again, like these kind of small fibers that obviously kind of sift through our sewage network and kind of go into our environment. And they're one of the main things that are kind of I suppose, an issue for the wildlife in our environment, because obviously the smaller animals and the phytoplankton and take up these microplastics, and then obviously the fish eat these fish eat the plankton, and so it goes up the food chain. So we end up with this accumulation of microplastics in our environment. But the great thing about plastic, I suppose, if it goes into your stomach, is actually you can, as long as it's small enough, can poo it out. And often, obviously, animals absolutely are able to get rid of that. But it's the toxins that are released into the tissues of those animals that's a big thing. But one way you can save, obviously, the microplastics going into your when you're using your washing machine is either using what we call a guppy friend. I have actually used one. It's all right. I wouldn't say it's the final solution by any stretch. And there's quite a few different companies at the moment developing like filters on the back of washing machines. And there's one called Planet Care, which I know Beach Guardian have been heralding as one that you can actually, that's kind of versatile and you can sit onto any washing machine. But it is hopefully coming into law that all washing machines at some point, and there is a big campaign going on at the moment by Marine Conservation Society called the Stop the Threads campaign, that all washing machines should be fitted with filters going forward. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll happen. But this is a slide I wanted to move on to, because I think once you've done all those little changes, often I suppose as you learn about the environmental kind of stuff that's going on and all the different things that are affecting, these are the sort of things that come onto my head on a daily basis when I'm in the supermarket, or if I'm in the high street, or if I'm at work. It's, I'm shopping around the supermarket and I'm asking, is it wrapped in plastic? Can it be recycled? Can it actually be recycled? Will it get shipped abroad? Did a child make this? Does it contain palm oil? Where is it produced? It says it's compostable. Is it actually home compostable? Will this shed microplastics every time I wash it? Can I get away with commenting about the amount of balloons at my friend's birthday? Will I sound like a twat? Do I have time to get the butchers, the bakers, the fruit and veg shop and the refill shop in my lunch break? Does this product contribute to cutting down the rainforest? And I think I just wanted to touch on, once you start on this journey, it can feel quite mental. But these are the sorts of things that I think when you start consciously living and actually thinking about the impact that you're having, not just in your day-to-day life, but the impact that your families are having, and how you transport yourself around the planet, and how you just go about your day-to-day job, you just start to live a bit more consciously. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But it can just be, what I'm saying is, it can be a really stressful thing. And I'm sure lots of you on this call will have felt that at some point, that sometimes it just feels like you can't do anything without hurting something or affecting something. And I think my kind of tip for this is, it doesn't really stop. It almost doesn't necessarily get worse, but I think there's a ways and means of trying to control these thoughts and processes that come into your head. And there's only a certain amount of time in a day to be able to do the right thing. And I think it's just kind of about breaking it down and working what you're capable of in your own family. I know that I try and go to the butchers once a month because we hardly get any meat, but my partner still likes to eat it every now and again. So when I do, I'm very persistent about not buying supermarket meat. I've made some silly rules for myself, like not allowed to buy supermarket meat, only from the butchers. I try not to buy any of my veg from the supermarket. But these are all just not silly rules, but things that I've set personally for myself that helps me, I suppose, live a little bit lighter on the earth. But they're not always written in stone. Sometimes I don't have time to go to the fruit and veg store and the butchers that week. So maybe we'll go without meat that week, but maybe I'll get some bananas from supermarket. So I think it's just about for me, and I think for lots of us on this journey, it's about, trying not to be completely overwhelmed, but just recognizing that it is part of this kind of process. Because like I said, plastic is just the gateway. And I think once you kind of get to grips with what we're doing as a society and how we're living, and you start to question how you're doing that and what you can do about reducing your impact. And it often feels a bit like this. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not funny. But it absolutely often feels a bit like this. And when you're making decisions, it often feels like this as well. You often have this kind of, where are we going, in the next 10 years, is kind of going to be the deciding fate of how much action do we take, or how little action do we take is going to kind of be the result of what our planet's going to look like in the next 30 to 40 years. And I definitely want it to look like it is on the right. And I have to try really hard not to look at what it's like on the left. And I think for all of us, you're obviously going to go through this process of thought all the time. But I think it's just important to obviously keep the faith. And what I have realized is that often in the news, there's often a lot worse stories than there are good, but actually there are so many good news stories at the moment going on, not just about the plastics, but about how we're tackling climate change, the growth of the renewable sector, laws coming into place. There is stuff happening, and there is this kind of simmering kind of movement that's kind of going on that is I suppose, I don't want to say a revolution is on the cards, I hope so, but there is definitely a simmering growing awareness in our communities where people are kind of sitting up and looking around and taking action. And it might not be that they're doing everything that they should be, but I think the point is that everyone's kind of on a different journey. I can't believe it, actually. My cousin just called me literally before I took this call, and I don't know she is one of those people that I just never thought was going to change at all. And she rang me tonight to tell me that she just bought her first pair of period pants. I was literally shocked because we talked about it a lot before and the sorts of things that she can be doing. She's like, oh, I'm not doing that. She's although she likes spending a lot of time outside, she's very much connected with the environment. She didn't really see the connection between what she was doing as a human and how that was collectively impacting the planet. So to just kind of have that little piece of good news from my own side of the family today was, and I know it's only small stuff. And I'm sure some of you maybe have watched Seaspiracy over the last couple of days, maybe since it's been released. And I've been asked a lot about our thoughts on it. Obviously, it definitely pitched one issue about the other. And there's this huge crisis going on with overfishing. Absolutely. But trying to weigh up, trying to pitch one issue against the other, I don't think was very useful by any stretch. And I think when you think about the issues that we're looking at, actually what it boils down to is the scale of which we've done them. And you look at meat production, plastic, recycling, everything. It's because of this over industrialization of everything that we've done that has kind of caused these massive problems. And actually, if you look at small scale fishing is fine, small scale farming I think is fine, small scale plastic use is fine, but when we blow it up to these kind of consumerist kind of models that have basically overtaken our world, it's completely I suppose unsustainable, and is detrimenting our planet to a massive degree. but yeah, I won't say too much more about Seaspiracy. Don't want to get into that. But anyway, my other sustainable tips is to talk to family and friends and colleagues and children and grandparents, and to keep banging that drum. But I suppose to lead by example rather than telling people what to do. I think people don't want to be told what to do. I think that everyone's on a journey, and actually everyone is an environmentalist. They might not be a very good one at the moment, but they've got the potential to be a really good one, and change happens quite quickly when they're given the right tools and education to be able to do so. We want you to try and say thank you and acknowledge the businesses that are consciously making changes, and choose them over others, and vote with your wallet. And this is especially important, I suppose, for those of you that use social media. It's a great place to give different businesses and people a boost if you think that they're doing something particularly good that you think others should be using. Speak out. If you can, if you have time to. I have a list of things to talk to Celine Saxby at the moment, and I haven't even got around to writing an email over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, just to remember to use your voice, write to your email, tweet, use your social platform. And if there's a petition that needs signing, just sign it. Don't do it the next day. That your voice on that petition definitely counts. And sometimes you might think, I'll sign it the next day. But petitions are one of the only things, one of the best things for getting things on an agenda, and definitely in front of MPs and then Parliament. You can always leave unnecessary packaging at the customer service. If you're feeling particularly bolshy, I don't often feel like this very often, but when I'm feeling particularly bad, I'll maybe do that. It depends on how friendly the person is at the till. And often what we do find is often they are super friendly, and they just kind of put it in their bin and kind of say, yeah, I don't like it either, which is always really nice to hear. And the other great thing about actually some of the supermarkets now have actually got a kind of better recycling service. So lots, both Sainsbury's and Tesco, you're able to recycle your soft plastics, and you have been able to for a while, but actually I think they've increased their selection. You can now recycle food pouches and different types of plastics, and you can find out about that on their websites as well. Again, just another quick one on that. Obviously, it is great that we've got all these recycling processes, but I think it's always good to think about where that recycling might be ending up. I don't actually know. I know that Tesco, obviously, because they don't use our kind of normal public recycling, they've got their own private service. And I think they've even got their own separate kind of sorting and recycling, like people that deal with their stuff. So I don't actually know exactly what they do with it, but that would be definitely good for us to follow up at some point. Obviously, picking up litter is just a great thing to do, helps you connect with the problem, and you can tag us and 2 Minute Beach Clean and whoever else to help spread that message. I think it's really, again, that's where social media has been really valuable. You don't have to do it every time you pick up litter, but it does sometimes just spark people to do those simple things. And yeah, it reminds us of the problem. There are actually several different apps now. I know 2 Minute Beach can have a great app where you can actually input the data but the stuff that you find into the app, so that they can start to monitor on a kind of regular basis for the sort of stuff that we're finding. If you're part of the community that hasn't set up kind of not just a plastic-free community, but any sort of environmental group, then it's always worth getting involved to feel like you're not alone in the problem. Because I certainly, before I set up Plastic Free North Devon, felt quite alone with some of the thoughts and feelings that I had about the environment and what we were doing to tackle it. And it wasn't until we set up Plastic Free North Devon and I saw that I wasn't the only one that was worried about that sort of stuff. And you only have to look at the XR movement and the following that they have in North Devon as well. The Countryside Centre being able to put on talks like this and people going to them. There's definitely an increase in people wanting to know more and wanting to take action. And I think that is kind of super promising for us here on a local basis. Choose fibres for clothing. Oh, I didn't finish that sentence. So choose natural fibres for clothing if you can. Obviously, like we were saying before, if you buy clothing that's made of synthetic fibres, which like lots of sports clothing especially is, it tends to obviously release those fibres. So try and stick to natural fibres. And I think this one's just a general buy less. Question: do you participate in fast fashion? If you do, that's something that you can probably immediately stop if you wanted to. You can organise clothes shops with your friends. There's great kind of, I suppose, online clothing things now, not just eBay, but there's Depot, which has lots of cool stuff and kind of follow trends and all sorts of stuff. I don't use it because I just wear the same clothes most of the time, but that's a good one if you're interested in kind of reusing clothing. And then the other one is obviously just to try and shop local as much as possible. This can help you reduce your carbon footprint as well as your plastic use. And we've got a directory on our website that kind of shows you all the kind of local fruit and veg stores, and all the kind of meat and fish, people that you can get that sort of stuff on if you're interested in that as well. And then ways of like auditing your workspace are the simple measures that you could put into place, and you could feed back to other people. And again, this just helps create a bit of kind of momentum in your workplace that you're starting to think about it, and that can kind of trigger behavior change in other people. And then again, just to sign petitions that call on the government for change, and just to beware of the greenwash. Greenwash is a massive one. Everything now when you buy it is sustainable, or home or compostable or recyclable. And I think it's just really important to kind of look at these things with a kind of a critical eye, and to just think about the thing is, do you need it in the first place? If you definitely need it, can you get it? Can you get it from somewhere else? Do you have to buy it new? And just to really think about the impact of the things that you buy, and the footprint that you're leaving. And then these are just some other things that I kind of popped up that were other organisations and groups to have a look at. We've obviously got 2 Minute Beach Clean, City to Sea, Beach Guardian, Sky Ocean Rescue. There's Emily Penn and her expedition staff at Surfers Against Sewage. Plastic Free Penzance are an amazing plastic free organisation down in Cornwall. We've got the Pledge for Nature, Biosphere Reserve stuff, which gives you lots of useful stuff, and tips on how to and what you can do for wildlife. And that's a great way of tracking all the other people that are doing cool stuff for the environment too in North Devon. Plastic Pollution Coalition got some great webinars on, especially on the health crisis relating to plastic and climate change. And Fashion Revolution is another great one for looking at the impact of fast fashion on our plastic usage. And then just some other books. We've got Martin Dorey, got Lucy Siegel's Turning Tide on Plastic, got Natalie Fee's How to Save the World for Free. This is an Emergency by XR. We've got podcasts, Sustainababble. It's a great one. I really like that one. It's lots of different kind of issues to talk about, lots of different environmental issues. And then we've got the Yikes podcast, which is kind of more intersectional issues. So looking at the plastic issue and environmental stuff from a kind of more holistic, intersectional way. And then obviously both university studies, both Exeter and Plymouth University support research on microplastics and have an array of recent papers of interest if you're interested in that sort of stuff. And I'm actually going to kind of finish here and ask for questions, but I just wanted to finish on this quote because it's the thing that I feel most, I suppose, passionately about, is that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think if you're somebody that's thinking about starting a journey or thinking about joining a local group or thinking about talking to your friends and family, just do it. We don't have lots of time. And the plastic issue, if someone's even doesn't think there's any environmental problems, just take them to the beach and show them the plastic issue, and that can link to climate change. It links to the oil industry. You can link it to overconsumption. You can link it to social issues. You know, it's the gateway, and for us it's a really important gateway, and it's one that we're going to keep talking about and keep using to galvanise the community to take action. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. I feel like I've babbled quite a lot there, but go for it.
Thank you, Claire. That was fantastic, and so many useful tips and different bits of information. So yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying, because we've got the solutions here now, and it's so important that as individuals we just keep talking to our families and our friends, because together we can get the momentum to change people's behaviour, which is really what we need, isn't it? So one of the things I was thinking about, because you mentioned about your local directory, which is excellent, and it's great that we really need to support our local producers and local shops, which have a lot more sustainable and plastic-free options. And I think quite a few of the towns now have actually got refill shops, which seem to be popping up and are great and very popular. So that's excellent. But one of the blockers is obviously still the supermarkets, because as you say, when you go in the supermarket, it's just so overwhelming. You just can't escape from the plastic. And I did see that some supermarkets are starting to do trials now of refill stations. Do you think that's something that we could try and encourage in North Devon?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good one. I'm not sure that Tesco have started trialing it yet, in particular, but we do have an amazing Heather, who used to be the manager here, is amazing. And she's gone up to a different store in Barnstable, and she's a real kind of spearhead for stuff. And I'm actually meeting her tomorrow about our kind of, we've got, I don't know whether you saw them last year, but we had those "Don't Even Think About It" posters around quite a lot of their, I suppose, problem litter items sometimes that we find on our beaches. So she wants to revamp that for this summer. So, and we're going to do it in all the stores. We're going to be doing it in Braunton, Ilfracombe, and Barnstable. So we're going to have these big "Don't Even Think About It" posters on varying different items, and hopefully some big frames outside the doors as well.
Fantastic. Can I just ask you to stop sharing your screen? Is that okay, Claire?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I can go to the grid view so I can see everybody. So so some people have already started asking their questions in the chat, which is fantastic. So I'll just go back up down a bit. Sorry, my cursor's not working very well this evening.
Got them.
Can you see those? Let me just go down. Just bear with me, everybody. Oh dear, sorry, my screen's gone a bit funny.
I've got it.
It's okay. I've got it now, Claire.
Got it. Okay.
So Martin was asking. So thank you very much for your inspirational talk. And so he gets quite a lot of magazines and other items sent in the post, so nearly all feature compostable wrappers. But can you put those in the compost bin though, or are they supposed to go to more industrial composting?
So it depends what it says. It should say home composting on it. If it just says compostable, then it's not fit for home composting, and that's just a way of them saying that it's compostable but in an industrial composter. So yeah, true greenwashing there. So it has to say home compost. It's not sometimes. Actually, I'll tell you what, if you look, I've got these. Have any of you tried these Stoke bars? They actually come in home compostable packaging, and it has a little tick and it says okay to home compost. And those, if they say home composting, then you can definitely put them on your home compost. They'll still take about probably 4 to 6 months to go. It won't do it over like a course of weeks, but they will definitely home compost. But yeah, anything that just says compostable basically means it's industrial composted, which means it needs to be at, I think it's over 60 degrees for it to compost properly.
Yeah.
I didn't really touch on it in the talk because I felt like I didn't have enough time, but the alternatives to plastic are often kind of these vegware type stuff that are made of biodegradable and compostable items, which is often they don't come from virgin plastics, which is obviously a great thing. It's great if you can get stuff that isn't from virgin plastic and from recycled items. But often these things will say that they're compostable, but actually they're not home compostable. They need to be put in an industrial composter. And we don't actually have a waste stream for industrial composting at all at the moment in North Devon. So it kind of sometimes doesn't defeat the point, but I just think it's something to be aware of. And that's why it's always like, rather than replacing one with another, it's always about trying to reduce what we're doing. So especially when it comes to coffee cups and stuff like that, it's such an easy one to remember your cup. But I actually had a really good chat with a nurse a couple of months ago, and she was saying she always remembered her cup no matter what. She got really annoyed when she forgot her coffee cup, but then obviously COVID kicked off and she was going through like 20 aprons a day, 20 pairs of gloves, masks. And she just said she just felt like it was, literally a drop in the ocean stuff. And I think she's right. Absolutely. At this time that we're doing it, like remembering your reusable cup is a drop in the ocean, but it is something that you can do. And I think, although it is really easy to feel like, what's the bloody point? And I get that feeling. But at some point, COVID will stop, hopefully, and there will be alternatives to that stuff as well. And actually, that is something that we just can keep doing, and it is something that we've got control over. And I think, you know, we often talk about, especially, you know, if any of you have watched in Seaspirited, they talk about a lot of this lobbying and all these huge things that we need to be doing, but normal people don't have access to lobbying. Normal people don't have access to going on a Sea Shepherd boat. So it's about thinking about what general public can do, and it's about giving people the right tools to do that stuff. And if remembering your reusable coffee cup is something you do, then definitely just keep doing it and don't feel bad for it not making much of a difference, because it will.
Yeah, exactly. It will all add up, won't it? Exactly. So Mary was asking, so she used to get magazines from conservation organisations. So a lot of them have actually ceased producing hard copies now. So a lot more are going digitally. So she thinks that's a good idea to campaign for more of this sort of stuff.
So we just
having magazine subscriptions and going digitally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be amazing. Because I think who is still giving them out in hard copies? Is it? Where's Mary?
Mary.
Yeah, most of them do. I mean, the County Wildlife Trust magazines, the National Trust magazines, you name it, sort of all of them. And, you know, they pile up, they take up room in your house. You don't always like throwing them out. And, you know, and now that seems to be unnecessary, you know. Really, I know it's true, they're not plastic. I mean, they're paper, but it's, you know, it's the same whole big problem. Really.
Yeah, I think, is it worth, have you emailed them about it?
No, I haven't actually, but
use your voice, Mary.
We ought to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I'd say just send an email and just ask them what their plan is. They might already have a plan to digitalize it. It would definitely be worth, but you're right, it's not plastic, but it's well, some of them are, but it's just another thing that's another bit of waste that we've got nothing, that you can't do anything with.
It's all part of thinking about the waste hierarchy, isn't it? We've got an excellent question here from Martha, who's age 10. How can I get more young people involved, and how do I get my school involved?
Hi, Martha. So your school, I'm pretty sure you go to Southmead. Your school should be signed up to the Plastic Free Communities campaign, and you can always check this. So your school is what we signed up as a plastic free school, and it would have been given a set of tools to be able to make their school plastic free. I don't think Southmead has achieved that status, because I'm pretty sure that I would know. So it's worth, I would say, emailing your teacher, or speaking to your teacher, or emailing your headmaster. I know he's really approachable, and asking him the question, and just being really honest about asking what steps he's taking to reduce plastic in your school. I know that every time we walk in and I drop Willow off, Willow always notices the litter on the floor, and it's funny, she picks it up and we put it in the bin. But yeah, you can offer to organize, if your school doesn't have an environmental group, maybe you could think about setting one up, and you could meet and do little litter picks, or you could write letters to our local MP and tell her to do certain things that I'd tell you to do, that I can inform you of. So yeah, you can kind of look, I think it's great to think small, like think about what you'd like to see in your own little world. So at your school, try not to, I know I've talked about quite a lot of big issues in my talk, so try not to be too overwhelmed, but to actually think about what you can control. Think about what's going on in your school, what's going on in your life, and then just try and maybe make a list of maybe like a little hit list. What would you like to see gone in your school? What would you like to see gone at home? And then try and work through as a family, and maybe with a few mates, where you can start to tackle those things. But yeah, definitely email your teacher, ask him if he signed up to Plastic Free School. If not, then why not? And then what he's doing to tackle plastic in his school.
Sounds like you need to get onto your headmaster, Martha. So you've got some actions there. Well done.
The other thing that I'm hoping to do it towards the end of this year is to try and sort of think about sorting up some sort of youth group that's affiliated with Plastic Free North Devon. I'm not quite sure how this is. It's just kind of a new seed that I've planted in my own brain, and I'd really like.
I think you've got a new recruit there, Martha.
My number one.
Well done. Excellent. Has anyone else got a question that they'd like to ask Claire? I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. So we'll draw oh, sorry. Marguerite, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicola. Hi, Claire. Good to see you.
Hi.
Just to say on the bodyboards that I put a motion on Broughton Parish Council agenda for Monday night.
Oh.
Because I think you had been talking to them anyway, but I wanted to make sure that they, what I proposed is that they join North Devon District Council's one, because I think we've got to work together on this, haven't we? We can't all work as separate little bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to work together and with you and whoever to support the Ban the Bodyboards campaign. And working with our businesses. I mean, there's full congratulations to the Staunton businesses, as you said, who have signed up, but there are others that do sell the dreaded boards in our parish. We can only cope with our parish, but that's on Monday night's agenda to get the council to formally sign up to your campaign.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, because we hadn't actually heard back from Braunton Parish Council, and I think Anne-Marie gave you a nudge a couple of weeks ago. But what's great is Val Can emailed me and asked me to see if I'd wanted to speak. So I'm happy to do so next week if you still want me to for just a couple of minutes. And I think there's only one person that we've identified that's selling those boards in the parish. And you're probably aware of who that might be.
We know who that is, yeah.
Yeah. So we were going to actually speak to them in the next couple of weeks, but I think we're going to wait until we've had your meeting so we get the full parish support before we approach him.
Yeah, well, I put it on as a member's motion, as a member of the council, as a councillor. It's all right, Ray's just dropped something. As a councillor coming from the members, I would hope all members would agree to it. I'd want to know the reason why. Some didn't, to be quite honest. And then we can work with everything officially as the council, which would be good. So that should go through on Monday night. I'll have a quick word with Tracy to see whether, because I put it as quite short and sweet, whether you coming along just to add and answer any questions might be an idea or whatever you think. There's bound to be some questions somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. We did just have so Willicombe was our kind of next on our list, but we just had a meeting with one of the guys that is still selling them, and he's got a stock of 2,500 and he's refusing to not sell them this year. So we can't unfortunately sign off Willicombe this year, but he will, once he's sold them, look to do it next year. And I think that's unfortunate. Like, he's not willing to get rid of £30,000 worth of stock, unfortunately, which is basically what that equates to. And I think we have to bear that in mind. They are people's livelihoods and stuff. And I'm figuring that we might get a similar approach from Braunton, the guy at Braunton, but we'll see what he says.
It's quite difficult at the present time, isn't it? Anything that endangers their businesses is quite difficult, but
yeah, absolutely.
We'll get there. But anyway, just to let you know that's on there, and I'll get Tracy to get in touch whether you just come along. I can put the motion, explain it, which I've done very short and sweet because I would hope everybody would know all about it, and whether you're there to answer any questions. That would be good, Claire.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
That's great work, Marguerite. And these issues are very tricky, aren't they, and very challenging. So, you know, the more that we can sort of approach these things strategically, it will definitely help. A question from Alice's iPad. So you mentioned Seaspiracy. Interested to hear your thoughts. A lot of people are swearing off fish. So what do you think?
Oh, so many thoughts from that film. My honest, I say my thoughts for it is shocking. I mean, I don't think anyone that watches any of those scenes will be shocked by a lot of what would be absolutely shocked and horrified for the state of our oceans, and the way that they're being managed at the moment is completely unsustainable. The systems that we have set up to manage our ocean are not fit for our times by any stretch. And actually, like when I actually did my dissertation back at university, I did my dissertation on the impacts of the Lundy no-take zone on local lobster fishing populations. And so I read the guy that obviously, Callum Roberts, who's one of the main speakers in that film, who he interviews, and he wrote a book called The Unnatural History of the Sea. And it was a book that I based my dissertation around, in the sense that he talks about the historical catches and the size of the catches, and kind of why fishing is at the level it is today, and why it's so unsustainable. Is because of obviously industrialization and the fleets and the invention of factory ships, so the ships could stay at sea longer, so they could catch more stuff. Nets the size of football fields, like times 100. It's just the scale of the way that we fish is completely unsustainable. And I think even Callum Roberts, what was that, 15-20 years ago, was calling on for 25% of the oceans to be reserves, essentially, so that fish and kind of the animals that live there have space to be able to kind of flourish and regenerate and all of that sort of stuff. And that was called for those years ago, and it still hasn't happened. I think it's like 0.01% of our oceans is actually officially no-take zones around the world, and it's by far not big enough. Do I think this fishing is sustainable in some places? Yes, I do. I interviewed quite a lot of fishermen as part of my dissertation, and my dad actually used to work for a trawlerman, and even back then, if they lost a net, they would send scuba divers down to kind of get it, because they were so expensive, they didn't want to lose them. And actually, the fishermen that I interviewed that were fishing over at Lundy, and their thoughts on the no-take zone were often that they were conservationists at heart themselves. They wanted to protect those places just as much as we do, because that's their livelihood. So I don't think the issue is with fishing per se, and on a very small scale and local way. The issue is with the scale that it's at, and the way that the masses that we produce it, and the way that we kind of go into a supermarket and don't think about where that's coming from. And I think the way that I suppose shop, and the way that I think about the way I kind of live, is that, when I pick up an item, I think about where has it come from, what's the carbon footprint of that project, how far has it flown. And I think if you can just start to ask those questions, you'll start to kind of answer your own, you'll start to just naturally live more sustainably. Because if you ask those questions and you don't get the answers that you want, actually they've cut down a mangrove to get those prawns, or actually they've killed God knows how many dolphins to get that tuna. Like, you can't, if you care about the environment, you can't consciously keep buying that stuff. But I think the problem is people aren't asking those questions, or they don't know about these things, so they just buy the stuff, and they buy the meat, and they buy the fish without thinking. So what we're trying to get people to do is, if we can get the population to be a little bit more conscious about where their stuff's coming from and how it's made, then that'll in turn have the kind of effect that we want it to. But I don't know whether I answered your question, but yes, I think fishing can be sustainable, and I think he was wrong to completely say that we have to stop completely. Do I think the scale of fishing is sustainable? Absolutely not, and we need a massive shift in that. And there is a campaign, the 30 by 30 campaign, which is calling on the 30% of the oceans to be marine reserves. And Blue Marine Foundation are a great one to follow for that sort of stuff. WWF. There's a couple of petitions flying around at the moment that you can add your name to for that.
Definitely, just keep asking the questions and keep thinking to yourself, is this the right thing to do, and just keep talking about it. I think that's one of the key messages from tonight, isn't it? Definitely. And talk to each other as well, because, as you say, it can be so overwhelming. And if you can join a local group and join local like-minded people, volunteer with the Countryside Centre, volunteer with Plastic Free North Devon, then, all these little things add up, and we can make the big change that we need. So we'll draw the evening to a close there. Thank you very much. Just a couple of reminders before we sign off. Bryony Paul from the North Devon Biosphere, so from the Pledge for Nature campaign, she's going to be outside the Braunton Countryside Centre on this Friday, 10 AM till 2 PM, and she's got materials for making house martin nests and wildflower seeds. So please do pop along and come and collect some materials for free from her. Next week's talk will be with Mukti Mitchell, and he's from Carbon Savvy. So he's going to be talking about what we can do to reduce our carbon footprints, but also by doing that, how we can improve our quality of life as well. And excitingly, we've got an additional talk at the end of the series, which is going to be with the Cane Catchment Beaver Partnership and they're proposing to introduce beavers on the Cane catchment, and they're working with the Beaver Trust to do that. So they're going to be doing a consultation event in 2 weeks' time. So I hope you can all come along to that and find out more about that, because that sounds quite exciting. And thank you all for coming and your contributions tonight. And finally, and a big thank you to Claire for a fantastic and inspiring talk with lots of tips and information that we can all take action on. So please do join me in the virtual round of applause or thumbs up. Thank you, Claire, very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening, everybody.
See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.